Top 10 sights to see in Paris. The Eiffel Tower. Built in 1889 for the Exposition Universelle, the Eiffel Tower, Tour Eiffel, has become the main symbol of Paris. It is also the most visited attraction in the world. The origin. Two senior engineers working for the architect and engineer Gustave Eiffel designed the tower, which was then approved by Eiffel and proposed as the centerpiece for the World Fair held in France's capital, the Exposition Universelle in 1889. Once approved, 250 builders were hired to build the monument, which took over 2 years to finish. Initially, the Eiffel Tower was subject of controversy. The artists of the period thought the monument to be monstrous, and given its poor profitability, it was suggested on several occasions that they should demolish it. During World War I, enemy messages were intercepted thanks to the Tower Radiotelegraphy Center. Currently, the Eiffel Tower is the most visited monument in the world with over 7 million visitors a year. This is partly due to the popularity of Paris as a tourist destination. Visiting the Eiffel Tower. If it's your first time in Paris, going up the Eiffel Tower is a must. Visitors can choose to go up using the tower lift or the stairs. However, before making your mind up on how you want to visit the monument, it is important to keep in mind that there are 1,665 steps to the top. If you decide to take the stairs, you can only visit the second floor. Although the stairs admission ticket is cheaper, the difference is not worthwhile and we recommend taking the elevator. The best moment to enjoy the breathtaking views of Paris is early in the morning to avoid the lines or at dusk, when visitors will see Paris lit up. Louvre Museum. Opened at the end of the 18th century, the Louvre is the country's most renowned museum, and one of the most visited in the world. Presently, it receives over 8 million visitors each year. Featuring the French monarch's art collection and the result of the pillaging which was carried out during Napoleon's empire, the Louvre Museum opened in 1793. Since its inauguration, the museum was free for the public during a few days a week and was considered revolutionary for its time. The building. The Louvre Palace houses the largest museum in the world. The 12th century fortress was extended and refurbished several times throughout the centuries. Before it opened as a museum, King Charles V and Philippe II chose this palace as their residence, decorating it with their ever-growing art collections. When the royal family moved to Versailles, the impressive building that covers a total area of 160,000 square meters was transformed into one of the most important museums in the world. A glass pyramid, which is currently the museum's principal entrance, was built in the palace's main courtyard in 1989, piercing the monotony of the Louvre's exterior. The exhibitions. The Louvre's permanent collection features nearly 300,000 works of art that date before 1948, and of which only 35,000 are visible to the public. The enormous collection is organized by themes in various departments: an Oriental Antiquities Department, Egyptian Antiquities Department, Greek Antiquities Department and Roman and Etruscan departments. The museum also includes a part on the history of the actual palace, including the Louvre during the Middle Ages, Islamic art, paintings, sculptures and graphic art. These are some of the most impressive paintings on display. The Mona Lisa by Leonardo da Vinci. Liberty Leading the People by Eugène Delacroix. The Wedding at Cana by Paolo Veronese. The most famous sculptures are Venus de Milo, an ancient Greek statue. Seated Scribe, an ancient Egyptian sculpture. Winged Victory of Samothrace, a Hellenistic sculpture. The Notre Dame Cathedral. Dedicated to the Virgin Mary, Notre Dame de Paris is one of the oldest Gothic cathedrals in the world and one of the best known. Its towers offer incredible views over Paris. Built between 1163 and 1245 on the Ile de la Cité, Notre Dame de Paris is one of the oldest Gothic cathedrals in the world. The name of the cathedral in English means Our Lady, and it is dedicated to the Blessed Virgin. During the last 8 centuries, the cathedral building has been renovated and restored several times. The most significant renovation took place in 1845 and took 25 years to complete. During this restoration, the flying buttresses were replaced, the chapel was restored, statues were added, and a new rose window was placed. Decisive events have taken place in Notre Dame, including the coronation of Napoleon Bonaparte, the beatification of Joan of Arc, and the coronation of Henry VI of England. On the 15th of April 2019, the cathedral suffered a serious fire, causing serious damage to the roof and the needle of the main tower. The Towers of Notre Dame. The cathedral has two towers standing 226 feet, 69 meters, tall on its facade. Visitors can climb to the top and, apart from the magnificent views of Paris, you can visit the Bell Tower, where the Hunchback of Notre Dame lived, and see the cathedral's multiple gargoyles. The access to climb the cathedral's two towers is found on the North Tower, Rue du Faubourg, and visitors will have to climb 387 steep steps, since the cathedral doesn't have an elevator. To skip the sometimes unending lines, we recommend that you download the Chvile application and reserve an approximate visit time online. Or if you prefer, you can also use the machines in the cathedral. The Arc de Triomphe. The Arc de Triomphe is an emblematic symbol of the capital of France, and it represents the various victories of the French army under Napoleon, who commissioned its construction. The Arc de Triomphe is, along with the Eiffel Tower, one of the main symbols of Paris. It stands 146 feet, 50 meters, tall, 148 feet, 45 meters, wide and 72 feet, 22 meters, deep. The monument represents all the French military victories in the Napoleonic Wars. Designed by Jean-François Chalgrin, the Arc took 30 years to build. It was commissioned by Napoleon in 1806 at the end of the Battle of Austerlitz and inaugurated by King Louis-Philippe. The 2-century-old Arc de Triomphe has witnessed the city's most relevant turning points, including Napoleon's funeral on the 15th of December, 1840, the World War I Victory Parade in 1919 and the Victory Day Parade to celebrate the end of World War II in 1944. The base of the Arc de Triomphe. At the base of the Arc is the tomb of the unknown soldier, erected in 1921. With a burning flame, it represents all French soldiers who died during World War I and were never identified. Each of the 4 pillars represents important victories, such as the French resistance during the War of the Sixth Coalition in 1814, the Treaty of Paris in 1815, La Marseillaise, and the Treaty of Schönbrunn in 1810. The Pantheon. The Panthéon was the first emblematic monument in the French capital. It was established before other major monuments like the Tour Eiffel. The Panthéon was the first major monument in Paris. It was built before the Arc de Triomphe and the Eiffel Tower, and was the first building that offered a panoramic view over France's capital. It is located in the Latin Quarter, very close to the Jardin du Luxembourg. The Panthéon was built between 1764 and 1790, firstly designed by Jacques-Germain Soufflot and later by Jean-Baptiste Rondelet. The Panthéon was created with the intention of combining the simplicity of the Gothic architecture with the stateliness of the Greek architecture. The history. During the 19th century and depending on the political regime, the Panthéon was either used as a religious or as a patriotic building. In the time of the Third Republic coinciding with Victor Hugo's funeral, the Panthéon's necropolis was used to bury famous French citizens. The Latin Quarter in Paris. The Latin Quarter, Quartier Latin, is situated south of the Ile de la Cité and is one of the liveliest and busiest areas of Paris. The area was named Quartier Latin during the Middle Ages, when the students of the University La Sorbonne, inhabitants of this neighborhood, used Latin as the language of study. Since the Middle Ages and up to the present day, students living in the Latin Quarter have had a huge influence on the rest of the city. During the 19th and 20th century, students organized movements of great political importance such as the Revolt of May 1968, a general strike that nearly brought down the French government of the time. Discovering the Latin Quarter. After crossing Place de Saint-Michel, where there is a towering fountain of Saint Michael fighting a dragon, you enter a maze of small and charming streets that make up the Quartier Latin. These streets are full of reasonably priced restaurants and cafes with terraces. Although there are several streets offering good restaurants, the main artery is Rue Hachette, and always a good option. The Montmartre. Montmartre is a large hill standing 427 feet, 130 meters, tall. It is one of the most charming, colorful and unique districts in Paris. Also known as the Painters' Neighborhood, its small and steep narrow streets are home to the oldest cabarets and to the Basilica of the Sacré-Cœur. This area is also full of restaurants with terraces and painters selling their work to tourists and locals. The history. Montmartre was an independent commune located just outside Paris until 1860, when it became the 18th district of Paris. At the end of the 19th century, the neighborhood was avoided by many Parisians due to the cabarets and brothels that opened in the area. However, many famous artists decided to live in the area during the Belle Époque, transforming it into the unique and surprising district it is today. Discovering Montmartre. Montmartre can be divided into two completely different areas. The first, near Place Pigalle, is defined by its numerous neon lights of sex shops and cabarets, including the renowned Moulin Rouge, attracting hundreds of tourists each year. The second is the more bohemian Montmartre, located in the Place du Tertre at the top of the hill, which is reached after having walked up 197 steps or having taken the funicular. This is one of the most captivating parts of Montmartre, and an ideal place to have dinner and a stroll through its streets, observing the artists while they work or sell their art. A maze of narrow and steep streets and alleys lead to the Basilica of the Sacré-Cœur, a beautiful temple from where you can see a fantastic view of Paris. Once you've reached the building, you'll see that the steps leading to the basilica are normally full of tourists and Parisians who spend their morning or afternoon enjoying the landscape. The Les Invalides. The Hôtel National des Invalides is one of the most important monuments in Paris, and it is the burial ground of one of the most iconic historical figures of France, Napoleon. The magnificent complex of buildings of Hôtel National des Invalides was designed during the 17th century as a home and hospital for retired French soldiers. First inhabitants of Les Invalides. In 1674, the first tenants of Les Invalides made these buildings their home. By the end of the century, there were over 4,000 soldiers and Marines who had served in the French armed forces for over 10 years and therefore could retire here. Contrary to what many might believe, these men spent most of their time studying and fixing shoes and army suits, among many other tasks. St. Louis des Invalides Cathedral. The cathedral was built for Louis XIV and the aged soldiers. Both would attend service every day, but would access the chapel through different doors. Église du Dôme, Church of the Dome, built between 1677 and 1706, the royal chapel later became a military pantheon, where the remains of Napoleon I rest. From the outside, the Golden Dome standing 100 meters tall is extremely impressive. The Soldiers' Chapel. This part of the church is decorated with hundreds of trophies taken from the country's enemies, representing the French armed forces from 1805 up until the 20th century. Relevant and impressive. The Hôtel des Invalides is one of the most important monuments in Paris, not only because of the artwork it houses and its beautiful golden dome, but because it is a decisive part of the French armed forces, and it is the burial site of Napoleon I. The Champs-Élysées. The Champs-Élysées is 1.2 miles, 1.9 kilometers, long and is the most beautiful and well-known avenue in Paris. It connects Arc de Triomphe with the Place de la Concorde and is considered one of the world's most famous commercial streets. The history. The origins of the Champs-Élysées can be traced to 1640 when space was cleared to plant a line of trees, which would later become an avenue. The name translates to Elysian fields from the Greek mythology, meaning resting place of Greek gods and dead heroes, similar to the Christian paradise. In 1724, the avenue was extended and acquired its current size, and in 1994 the city renovated the street sidewalks, improving the Champs-Élysées considerably. Nowadays, its buildings are high-end stores, cafes and offices, ideal for shopping or going for a stroll down one of the most beautiful avenues of the city. The Champs-Élysées is also renowned worldwide, especially among sports fans, as it is the site of the Tour de France's last stage. A walk down the Champs-Élysées. The avenue is divided in two. The lower part, closest to the Place de la Concorde, runs through a park with imposing buildings such as the Palais de la Découverte, Discovery Palace, the Petit Palais and the Grand Palais. The higher part of Champs-Élysées begins at Place Charles de Gaulle, where the magnificent Arc de Triomphe is situated, with numerous high-end stores, restaurants, cinemas and large department stores. The Champs-Élysées ends at the opposite side of the Arc de Triomphe, where the Avenue de la Grande Armée leads to the Grand Arch de la Défense and the district of La Défense. From the Grand Arch, visitors have an amazing view of Champs-Élysées. The Palace of Versailles. The Palace of Versailles is an imposing royal palace with over 1,974.84 acres of garden. The Château de Versailles combines history and culture and is one of the most popular destinations near Paris. Declared World Heritage Site by UNESCO over 30 years ago, the Palace of Versailles is one of the most famous palaces worldwide. Travelers are not only drawn to see its magnificent architecture and its endless gardens, but to discover a palace that was so significant during the history of France. The history. King Louis XIV transformed and enlarged his father's, Louis XIII, pavilion and hunting grounds in the village of Versailles. Years later, in 1682, the court and government were moved to the Palace of Versailles. Since then and up until the French Revolution, different monarchs continually improved the palace. The gardens were designed in 1661. However, these were not completed until 40 years later. The construction took nearly 4 decades as part of the land was frequently flooded, and the rest was a heavily dense forest, thus needing the help of thousands of men to bring in earth and the right flora. In 1789 the royal family returned to the capital, and the chateau became the Museum of the History of France. Visiting the palace? During the visit to the royal palace in Versailles, visitors will be able to discover a vast number of beautifully decorated rooms. The most impressive parts of the chateau are the enormous chapel, the grand apartments of the king and the king and queen's bedchamber, with a lot of decorative ornaments. Equally important is the Hall of Mirrors, Galerie des Glaces, a remarkable gallery 239 feet, 73 meters, long with 375 mirrors. It is one of the most acclaimed rooms in Versailles, and it is here that the armistice of First World War, in 1919, was signed in the Treaty of Versailles. Visiting the gardens. The impressive gardens of Versailles are over 800 hectares in area. The grounds have countless types of flowers and trees, as well as lakes, fountains and marble statues. It is practically impossible to see the whole enclosure if you go by foot. The best way to discover the grounds is to hire a bike, an electric car, or take the train that drives through most of the gardens. Some of the most important sites of the Palace Park are the Grand Trianon, a small palace in pink marble, or the Petit Trianon where Marie Antoinette, queen and wife of Louis XVI, enjoyed a quiet and simple country life. Visiting Versailles with enough time. Currently, the Palace of Versailles is one of the city's top attractions. Visitors will understand a lot of France's past and culture by visiting these grounds. Besides, it is possible to enjoy a bit of nature walking in the gardens. Nonetheless, it is also important to highlight some of the negative aspects of this visitation. The palace is always crowded, it is quite stressful to see all the rooms, and the gardens are too large to be able to see them all.